How's it going, everyone? Gabriel Gonzalez here, and today let's going to explore now the React 19 version. All right. So what we're gonna do is just to understand how can we now build things from the scratch using React to understand what React is. As a way to recap, how do we get here, and then we're going to look now is at the new features on React 19. But this course is focused on React, React 18, and then on the new features of the React 19, right? So let's get into this. So this introduction is just as a way to describe who is this course for, and whether if you are somebody new to this or you want to sharpen your skills. So this is the right score to do, and also to understand that if you don't know the principles, you're going to develop a resentful against your tools. And so my approach with this is I was going to learn the mechanics, how things work, why they do the way they why they work the way they do, and then we can say, all right, now we're gonna hit some, or as we hit barriers of complexity, we're going to understand now what this tool is doing for us. And let's get into this. This is a course taught by Brian Holtz, software engineer that has previously worked at Reddit, Netflix, Microsoft, Snowflake, and now he's currently at Neon. All right, so let's get into this.
Let's hop in and start writing some React so that we can eventually make Padre Genos. So you can see here, I'm in my complete intro to React V9 project. The way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to make a new directory in here, and I'm just going to start working out of that directory. I think that's just going to be the easiest for me. Yeah, let's do that. We'll call this just call Padre Genos, because that's what we're going to make. Okay, and then I'm going to open this in my VS Code editor. So Padre Genos, empty directory. We're going to make a index.html. Okay, and we're going to start.
All right. We're gonna make their complete intro to React, but in this case is version 9 project. It's gonna get in there. Version 9 project, that's right. And it is going to make their Padre Genos. It's a Padre Genos. All right.
Building React with no build HTML. This code editor. So Padre Genos, just call Padre Genos, because that's what we're going to make. Okay, and then I'm going to open this in my VS Code editor. So Padre Genos,
In cursor.
empty directory. We're going to make a index.html. Okay, and we're going to start building React with no build step. So we're going to write React in a way that I don't know of anyone that actually writes React without a build step, but I want to show you that it is actually indeed possible.
So basic React app. This is a React without build step and vanilla React.
So one of my favorite cheat codes in VS Code is that there's Emmet built in, so I can just say HTML:5, and then I can just hit tab, and it just generates a valid HTML document for me. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to call this Padre Genos.
So index, I can say coach.
Okay, and then I'm going to have a div that's going to be root.
And then if I want to access to this,
and I like to put something in here because this will get replaced, and so if you see not rendered on the page, you know something went wrong. And then we're going to put a couple of script tags on here.
That's interesting.
In here because for me, React without a build
because
step that there's Emmet built in, so I can just say HTML:5,
HTML,
and then I can just hit tab, and it just generates a valid HTML document for me.
Generate all of that for me.
So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to call this Padre Genos. Okay, and then I'm going to have a div that's going to be root. And I like to put something in here because this will get replaced, and so if you see not rendered on the page, you know something went wrong.
That you're going to call is root.
And then we're going to put a couple of script tags on here.
The tag here.
So we're going to do script.
So this is now script
source
not rendered.
If I were you, I would just grab these directly from my page here, because otherwise it's really annoying to write by hand.
Yep.
Unpackage was actually created by one of the React router authors, and it's basically just a CDN full of every NPM package. It's really nice. You can do things like this where you can just load things directly off of the CDN and get started with something off of NPM with no build steps.
So
yeah, exactly. Unpackage.com, we're getting from React
using is React
18.3.1. UMD stands for Universal Module Definition, and we're grabbing React and React DOM. Just a quick note on why there's two packages. React is the universal interface for React.
So React is the universal interface for React. In other words, is the interface that allows you to build this user interface. And now you have is another library called the React DOM that allows you to render those elements that you tell to React, right? So, for example, this is if you want to render, so if you want to use now React to render a specific element, all right, let's say a text, whether it's on the web or on the mobile, all right, you have now a specific render that allows you to do that. That's what we have, for example, React Native for that, okay? Or stuff like React DOM. Or also you have is the React React LG. Okay.
So things like React Native, React 3D, React 360, all of those use the same React package. And then the actual rendering layer underneath it that's specific to the DOM, to the browser, is called React DOM. So if you're ever working in a browser, you'll always just have these two packages. If you're working in React Native, you'll have a different React Native toolkit, but it'll still use the same React package. Okay, I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to open my terminal here. And we can do a fun little trick here that I'll do, npx serve, just like that. It'll ask you, is it okay if I install this package? You can say yes. And this will actually just start serving it directly on port 3000 here. And you can see I'm getting this page up on localhost 3000. There's a trillion ways to run like a local host server. This is just a very fast one using Node. But you could do php-s. There's a Python one. You can run Nginx via Docker. You could literally just open this directly with like Command O and open it in the browser. So we have this, it's opening on our page. It's using serve. Serve is made by Vercel, in case you were curious. You get some nice little server logs here. It's kind of fun. We have our two script tags here, unpackage from React and React DOM. And the last one, we're gonna put one more script tag on here. And this is just gonna go to /source/app.js.
React Fiber, interesting, okay.
As you might imagine, we're gonna create a directory here. We're gonna call it source. And we're gonna create a file in there, and it's gonna be called app.js. So inside of app.js, we're going to create our very first React component. So we're gonna say const app equals, I'm just gonna do an arrow function here. If you've never seen this like fat arrow before, this is my ligature, which is the font, right? Combining an equal signs and an angle bracket. That's what a ligature is. I left a note in that in my setup part of the course, if you want to know how to do that.
And now let's going to create is the
okay, and then I'm going to return React.
In our case, is
nope, not that.
The app dot
create element.
App source.
Okay, and then we're going to put in a div.
There the source and
an empty object. You also could put null here. Both of those are fine.
.js.
And then another React dot create element of an h1
parent,
empty object,
say,
and whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call mine Padre Genos.
so I can say
Okay.
something like this. So
Then we're going to go down here and say const container. We're going to grab this.
make there.
Where what? Okay, and then we're going to S. So inside of app.js,
Say
we're going to create
here,
our very first React component.
source,
So I'm going to say
and
const
start
app
with that.
equals. I'm just going to do an arrow function here.
Okay.
If you've never seen this like fat arrow before, this is my ligature combining, which is the font, right? Combining an equal signs and an angle bracket.
Make there.
That's what a ligature is. I left a note in that in my
And
my setup part of the course. If you want to know how to do that.
Source this.
Okay, and then I'm going to return.
And inside
React.
of the source, we have now the app.
Nope, not that.
And we're gonna create now it's just a
Create
simple
element.
function out of this, right? And this simple function is to say, hey, const app, right? I want to reserve a spacing memory for this. And because I'm going to use this now React for that, I want to now import React to create is an element. This is a way of nobody actually doing this kind of stuff. You can say React, okay, because I already import that. It is globally available. This is one of the things that I don't like about work with global variables, because they're not that visual. They're not ink, so you can see that. If you're quite familiar with developing, of course you know that, but in any case, this is just my take on that. And then we're gonna create element here, that inside of here we have now the options here. We can put a particular tag name followed by the options here. So in our case, the tag name that I want to do is to say, hey, this will be now in a string. Okay, tag name which will be now in the string, and I can say, hey, nh1. Okay, it can be an element tag name map as well, you know. But the thing here is that it can tell you that, hey, it can be a string or it can be a map element there, right? We can say, hey, this will be now hello.
And then another, I'm going to call mine Padre Geno.
You know, you can call it this like that, or you can call it something like this. You can say div followed by the options. Okay. In this case, followed by, and there you got it. And then you can pass now is another element here, React.create element, right? You have now this stuff, say, with the content here, we'll say Padre Geno, right? As the last element. So another option which is empty, and then now Padre Geno, right? Padre Genos.
Knows.
But the
Okay.
thing here is that this is the way how we can compose.
And we're gonna go down here and say
slowly
const
all of
container.
this
We're gonna
particular
grab
component.
This, where did I put it? This one, root, right? So we're gonna say const container equals document.
So now I want to actually is get that ID by saying is document get element by ID, in this case as root, right? And whatever content you want to have, whatever, once you find that, no, I want to store that in a container here, variable, that now I want to then render the content inside of this. How can I render that content? By saying is React DOM, I think this is right? By saying, hey, React DOM, I want to create node, something like that,
dot create root.
or create root, exactly. So I want to now is append this element, all right, the container element.
Container.
All right. So I want to append a container element here, and I want to save this element as the root, okay? And therefore say, hey, root dot append, and I want to now add all of these elements inside of the app, right? They have particularly component.
And then we're going to say root dot render.
Okay. Now it is called dot render. Okay. Where here I'm saying, hey, root, exactly, root dot render. I want you to now this element that we get from the DOM, and then we notify React DOM about the element, the root element. Then I want you to, inside of that element, render all of its components that I'm passing here, which is the app, right? Depending of how, this is part of the implementation details, right, and how it's going to accept that. You can pass this the app, or you can pass this like this, right? Okay.
React create element app.
This is another way of how you can pass this, right? Or you can pass this the component as it is, or you can pass this as the React create element. Okay, all of these are wrappers around the HTML DOM. Makes a lot of sense. App, like this. So if we run this, right? So we say, hey, I want to give me is the open copy remote file URL. No, copy relative path here. No. Copy full copy path, right? And then if I go to the browser, then I'm trying to get access to, I actually render Padreginos properly, but it doesn't render that because now once you save this, you're gonna see that now Padreginos. You know, it also take a moment to actually identify these elements and then render that, right? Look at how initially, if you for example now slow down this a little bit and say, hey, let me throw the network here by saying debugger console inspector, what it is, the network, all right, and let me say, hey, we got into this, right? A very slow network, you know. You can see the initially showing not rendered. Once now it downloads the CDN package, let me show you what's going on here. Style performance network here, because it's already, but it say this is already catch, right? Even though the browser now is trying to find ways to do that, so you can say disable cache. But what happened here is that it tries to download that. Let me see if what's going on. On the network, 4 requests has been fired. Performance. The thing is that initially it shows you that, right? And if you look at this, let me actually put it now in a relative good network here. All right. That's quite interesting. No throttling. Okay. So depend of the three connection, right? It might take a while to download that, or in this case, to read from on package here. It might take quite amount of time to read that. But once that is done, it now show the content as it is. You might say this can be imperceptible, right? It's like a lot of people actually have a very good internet connection, but the thing is that that exists, and that's happened, right? So yeah, we can also test that on 4G LTE, right? It will take a moment to download all of that libraries, right? And there you got it. So the React in itself, with at least the development, because we are working on the development. If you set that to production, of course, it'll be much more faster. But the production, look at how much it weighs, right? 208, and not to mention that the render actually weighs double its size. So it's also something to take notes out of this and how that actually is working. Okay. Because let me this not throwing. There you got it. All right.
So it's probably not. So we have the div, we have the h1, and then we have this a component. I like to like compare this to like a stamp, right? So we made this like app stamp, and now we can go stamp it as many times as we want, right? Because a reusable piece of like a reusable component. You can imagine like you have like a pizza one, because that's what we're literally about to create here in just a minute. And if you have 5 different types of pizza, you can stamp it out 5 different times. But you're creating your little stamp here, and then what create element does, the only thing that it does is it's just like stamps the stamp once, right? So I'm calling the react.create element here with app, and I'm just saying, hey, instead of root, go stamp app once, right? And you get an instance of the class, or an instance of the component. So element, instance, you can kind of associate those two words together. Component, class, you can kind of associate those two words together. If you're an object-oriented programmer, that'll make a lot of sense to you. If you're not, you're like those, you're just saying words now and making like me feel weird, right? I get it. Anyway, app, reusable component. That's the part that you really want to take away from this.
And the other is that how you can now create this composition.
Let's make another component up here. We're going to call it pizza. Okay, this is going to be another component. And we're going to say return. Oh, yeah, we have to do react.create element return.
Exactly.
It's going to be a div. It's going to be empty object here. We're going to give it an array, just for fun. Because we want to return multiple top-level React components, and that's how you do it. You do it with an array. React.create element, h1, empty object, and this is going to be the pepperoni pizza. Feel free to put in here whatever you want. If you like a pineapple on your pizza, no judgment here.
So here what we're going to do is just to render is a list of elements. Here.
So we've now made this pizza component. You see this is returning an array. This is the way that you return 2 like siblings as like a top level component here. The other way that this could work, you can actually delete this and have it just be like multiple parameters to the react.create element function. Honestly, it doesn't really matter because once we start getting into JSX, it's irrelevant of how it happens. But just so you know, under the hood, JSX will convert this to an array, which occasionally can be useful, or it's at least good to know, or irrelevant. I don't know. You might forget it, and who cares? Anyway, an array. So now we have this array, and we want to render a bunch of pizzas inside of our app, right? So we're also going to turn this into an array. I'm going to move this create element inside of it as the first thing, and then I'm just going to create a bunch of pizzas. React.create element pizza. Okay, and I'm just going to make a couple of those. So something you might be gathering here, if it's a string, it's going to literally output that string to the DOM as like a DOM node, right? And if it's a function or a React component of some variety, right, it's going to try and render that function. But the cool thing about React is you kind of get to treat them the same. Now you might be asking like, well, what happened to this stuff, right? You can put it in there. So this will pass down properties into Pizza, and we'll look about that in just a second. And you can give Pizza children elements as well, which we'll also talk about later. But just so you know, it's the same function. It works exactly the same way. Because we have nothing to give it as children, because we have no properties to give it, we can just omit all of it, which is what we're doing here. Okay, so again, my favorite thing to do, what do we expect to happen here? And I like to work at the top of the tree, which is app, and then work my way down. All right, so we're gonna render into root app. So we're gonna render this. Then we're gonna have a div, and inside of that div, we're gonna have an h1 with Padre Genos, which is what we had before. But then we have pizza here. Okay, so this is gonna go into pizza, and it's gonna render an h1 with pepperoni pizza, and a p with mozzarella cheese and pepperoni. Okay, it does it once, and then it's gonna do it again. Another h1, another p, and it does so 5 different times, right? So far, so good. Makes sense. So how many H1s do you expect?
If I want, for example,
mildly
render
trick
this
question.
element here, right?
6, right? Because you're gonna have 5. Which ones do you expect?
So what you're gonna do is, for example, if you wanna render this element, you might say, hey, I want to render these elements on the top. All right. Hey, I want to render these elements on the top. And then you can pass this an array for to this, and then render all of these elements. So you create this stem, this stem. You say create element for that, and then you say, hey, this is the stem for the pizza. Okay, so you want to create now here is several of them. 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this we're gonna render is now 5 times. If we go back to the code, we render this, as you can see, we got now all of this, right? It's repeating, of course, 5 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the thing here is that all of this, let me actually show you the code quickly, because show you the code quickly. Firefox here. Padre Genos, right? Let me show you the code. I want to render is cursor with Padre Genos like this, right? So you can see here now, this is a little bit of the code. Let me actually zoom in, right? Get rid of this, get rid of the chat as well. No. How can I close this? How can I get rid of the chat here? All right. And well, as you can see, the TLDR of all of this is that with React, by using the create element, we are now telling essentially a React, hey, I want to now is render all of these elements here. Okay. I am creating now a function that is going to return this. And the way why we are creating a function is kind of out of the scope of today's video and this series of video. But the thing is that this particular pattern is useful when it comes to now is creating new stamps. In this case, pizza. In this case, this UI element. So anytime that you create now a React component, or in other words, is this stamp where you want to, when you can tell React, where do you want me to stamp this, to print this, right? So I'm telling to React, hey, I want you to now print this right below here, right? This is part of the format that they follow. Right below here, right below here, right below here. Oh, you can also pass that to render is as a parent as well. But the whole point of this is to understand that anytime that GSX or you're using GSX, what you're telling is that this is the stamp that I want to print, and I'm going to keep that in some place, in some space in memory, all right? And by the time that I want you React to render this is what I want to do, right? And this is why we can now compose is stuff like this, or more complex UI that we're gonna see that later on. For example, admin dashboards and landing pages, web apps, so small app games, so on and so forth, right?
It's kind of mildly a trick question. 6, right? Because you're going to have 5 from the pizza and then 1 from Padre Gino's, right? That's why it says mild. It probably was illuminating to no one. You probably got that right away. That's fine. It made me feel smart to say it. And we're going to say here on props, we can pull things off of it that we pass down into it.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to give it whatever the name of the pizza is, and then we want to give it a description, right? So we're going to say props dot, I call it description. I did. So cool. Now it's a bit more flexible. It can accept a name. I can accept a description.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead and add these to our pizzas. So this is where this object is going to come in handy. Now we can come in here and say object, and we're going to give it a name. And we'll give it, this one can be the pepperoni pizza.
Mm-hmm. So let's
and
make this.
the description.
So let's make this a little bit more.
I have like nice looking descriptions here, and I'm not going to do that because I don't want to type that much. So some dope pizza, right? Something like that. Whatever you want to put there. I'm not your mom.
Here we can make it more flexible by passing
name.
out some variables. So props dot name.
We're going to put the Americano in here because I was just talking about it.
Then
And I want you to sit
right
there and
below
think about
props
French fries on your
dot
pizza. That's really what I want from
description.
this.
You may wonder where this comes
French
from.
fries
Description.
and hot dogs.
Okay.
What the WTF, right? So,
WTF. And you can get now is from props, right? So because we don't want to write this over and over and over, okay? I just want to in fact now try to copy this, say pixel perfect pizzas, right? In our case, we're not gonna do that. We just say is, hey, this is the component that I want you to render. All right, this is the component that I want you to render. Can you now apply some format here for me? No, okay. No, bro, I didn't touch you. Jesus, French toast guy. Anyway, so because here we're making it a little bit more flexible by passing parameters here, and now this stamp can render its elements in the most flexible way, so we can pass any other data. So what I'm gonna do is just to copy all of this, okay, right below here, and here we got it, right there we got it. Cool. Yep. And once we render this, we save this, we go back to the terminal. Okay, we save it, we go back to the go back to the browser. We render this, and as you can see now, look at this, right? So the TLDR of all of this is that anytime that you are creating, this is for a more bigger sense of what you are doing with React, right? It's the idea that anytime that you're creating now a functions to render something, so essentially you are now is having this rubber stamp, all right, ready to print something once you now tell them what to do and when to do, right? Because we also can add some logic to that, so on and so forth.
Something like that. Whatever you want to put there. Description, our Padre Gino's website that we're about to go build you imagine that we have to display pizza in various different parts of the website. On the pizza of the day, we have to show it. On the orders page, we have to show it. On the past orders page, we have to show it. And now we just get like one pizza component that we just, if you give it the right information, it's going to display nicely and encapsulate all of the logic for making a pizza, right? It's kind of interesting to look at the history of React and why it's built this way. When React was created, the really big things on the market were model view controllers or model view models of frameworks, which was like Backbone, old Angular, Knockout. They all had these kind of like, they were copying basically what Rails was doing on the back end, and they were trying to ship that logic to the front end. I wrote lots of it, pretty good code bases. I mean, I'm not actually going to really talk down too much to it, but React kind of had this like epiphany. It's like, you know what's actually really easy to write websites with? PHP, right? The page model really appealed to them, where like you have everything kind of mashed together for small things, right? So instead of trying to separate, here's my model that talks to the database, here's my view of what people look at it, and here's the view model, which connects the two things, they were like, let's take the model, the view, and the view model and shove it together so you have these components that contain everything for very small pieces of code. That was kind of the PHP way unintentionally at the time, but I'll say that my first job was I was a PHP dev. I was very productive, right? I shipped a lot of code very quickly. So that is the story of React.
Here we go. I ship a lot of PHP code very quickly. And I love this because this is part of the thing that I actually want to
really
take note of this.
I had these kind of like, they were copying basically what Rails was doing on the back end, and they were trying to ship that logic to the front end.
Let me actually a little bit of history, right? So a little bit of history, I will say here, right? And that is to do a little bit of history. Before React, everybody was doing this kind of rendering at the server via MVC, Ruby via MVC, kind of mimicking what Ruby was doing. All right.
I wrote lots of it, pretty good code bases. I mean, I'm not actually going to really talk down too much to it, but React kind of had this like epiphany. It's like, you know what's actually really easy to write websites with? PHP.
So React team kind of have this idea of so React team kind of have this idea or kind of have this epiphany okay, so React team kind of have this epiphany where they say, you know what is, it is actually, you know what is really,
right?
You know,
talk down too much to it,
really
but
easy to build
React kind of had this like epiphany. It's like, you know what's actually really easy to write websites?
They say, you know what is you know what is actually really easy to write websites with PHP, right?
With, you can really talk down too much to it, but React kind of had this like epiphany.
React kind of had this epiphany. Exactly.
It's like, you know what's actually really easy to write websites with? PHP, right? The page model really appealed to them, where like you have everything kind of mashed together for small things, right? So instead of trying to separate, here's my model that talks to the database, here's my view of what people look at it, and here's the view model, which connects the two things, they were like, let's take the model, the view, and the view model and shove it together so you have these components that contain everything for very small pieces of code. That was kind of the PHP way unintentionally at the time, but I'll say that my first job was I was paying every people look at, really appeal to them, where like you have everything kind of mashed together for small things, right? So instead of trying to separate, here's basically what Rails was doing on the back end, they were trying to ship that logic to the front end. I wrote lots of it, pretty good code bases. I mean, I'm not actually going to really talk down too much to it, but React kind of had this like epiphany. It's like, you know what's actually really easy to write websites with? PHP.
You know what is really writing. You know what is really easy writing websites website with PHP. The page model, when instead of having instead of having the model the model that talks to the database, the model that talks to the database, the model that talks to the database, the view, the controller,
right? The page model really appealed to them, where like you have everything kind of mashed together for small things, right? So instead of trying to separate, here's my model that talks to the database, here's my view of what people look at it, and
so the page model, when instead of having the model that talks to the database, the view of what people see, which connected to things,
and here's the view model which connects the two things. They were like,
which connects the two things. Okay, let's go to shovel up.
Let's take the model, the view, and the view model and shove it to.
Let's take the model, the view, and the view model
together, so you have these components that contain everything for very small pieces of code.
Exactly. So let's take the model of view and the view model together, that has everything for small pieces of code. This is interesting because, again, Facebook and React were trying to solve these small problems, right? All of this, how do you call it? All of this enterprise problems that they having back then, and that's the reason why now the React team say, hey, you know what? Okay, let's going to now push a little bit by trying to render everything on the server initially with React 19 features. But the thing here is that they focus vastly is on how you can create now these kind of applications that has everything that it needs to at once, which is kind of the idea also with Vue, which takes inspiration from React as well as from Angular with this two-way data binding communication, okay? And they now create its own way of how it can keep track data. Because unlike React, where it only focuses on building this small, tiny stamps ready to be, so anytime ready to be called, or ready when you need them to print that, to stamp that, to print on it, all right? Whether it's a button, a list, or something there, they are ready to print that, right? It doesn't handle the issue of how you're gonna handle is the data, all right? And especially data that change, that mutate at some point it needs to do, and how you can keep track of state changes. So that's what we have now. For example, is Redux or context as a way to at least define these small data layers, so you can now have a sense of what's going on for at least small pieces of data. And yeah, this is, for example, Vue frameworks actually learn a lot of React and that kind of stuff. But it's interesting because it's all about
That was kind of the PHP way unintentionally at the time, but I'll say that my first job was I was a PHP dev. I was very productive, right? I shipped a lot of code very quickly. So that is the story of React, of how we got this idea of like, we're going to take everything for these small components and we're going to shove them together so that you have everything for one concern in one place. And it turns out for UIs, that's extremely useful. Because now we can have this pizza logic, and we can, instead of having to connect everything together, we have to connect the view model to all these different places. We just say, here's a pizza, and all the logic for pizza is contained in one space. It's great. I obviously have been doing it for a decade, so I stuck with it. So it's a really nice way of writing interfaces. You'll see this like little checkered flag here. If you click this, this should take you to the directory that we were in, right? So this is the No Frills React one. You'll click in there, you'll see that we have our app.js. This is a much more culturally sensitive version of what we were writing. Yeah, so if you got stuck, you feel free to go grab this code or take a look, and you can diff between the two and say like what's different, what worked, what didn't work. And just look for those checkered flags throughout the course.
Okay. Let me create a new one here. Let's say Okay. So let's go into do this. Here we are. That's right. Oh, so we'll need to say is Padre Gino's origin, right? Say Padres Gino's origin. Okay. Oh, of course, because we don't have anything right now. That's right. So git git status. All right. So you're gonna add everything here. No, not at all. Not at all, my friend. In fact, I just want is to oh, I need to git init here. Much better. All right. I already initiate a Git project, and then you can say now I want to is add the remote here. Okay. Exactly, failed to push some ref because we don't have anything there. So git add everything here. Git commit with a say a message to say is plain React, no build, no build, no build tool, All right. And also I want to is before doing this is to add a readme here. Say readme.md. Okay, where this is a course from date, right? This is not my course. And just only take notes out of this. Yep. That's right. Okay. So what are the concepts? Okay. XS. Why React is so appealing for PHP developers? So what is the value proposition of React? All right. What's a hook and what type of hook exists? The React ecosystem. Okay. Yeah, the React ecosystem and advanced React techniques, right? And demos. That's right. Testing and demos, right? That's all. Okay. All right. All right. Cool. Cool. Cool.
This is the No Frills React one. You'll click in there. You'll see that we have our app.js.
And now
This
the
is a-
tooling. Right.
Take a little bit of a break from writing React, and we're going to talk about tools, which seem to bother everyone but me. I love tools. That's why I've worked in DevTools for a very long time. I've shown you enough vanilla JavaScript React for you to know exactly what's happening underneath the hood. From here, we're going to move into JSX, which was a huge barrier to adoption for a lot of people, especially early in the life of React, where they're like, hey, we don't really want to write this compiled to JavaScript language. It feels weird. But we'll get there in just a second. For now, we're going to set up all the tools so that we can do that. So the first thing is we're going to use NPM. I'm going to use NPM for the life of this course. Feel free to use Yarn. Previous versions of this course have used Yarn before. PNPM, you can see I have a call out to that as well. I think that's getting PNPM. You can see I have let's make another component directory that we were in. Right, so take a little bit of a break. Use NPM for the life. See, I have a call out to that as well. I think that's getting more and more popular, but it's kind of hard to go wrong with just straight up NPM. If you're not familiar with NPM, it does not stand for Node Package Manager, but it kind of stands for Node Package Manager. That's what they say. They say it doesn't stand for that. And then I just like finish the sentence and don't say anything else. It's kind of annoying. Anyway, it is the package manager for Node.js. And it allows you to install these things directly off of the NPM registry, which is now owned by GitHub, which is in turn owned by Microsoft. It allows you to do things like NPM run or NPM install React, things like that. So in our project, let's go do the first thing here. You can go ahead and stop serve. We won't be using that anymore. That's Control C if you're not familiar with Linux. All right, so I'm going to do npm init. You'll see that you'll get out of here a package JSON here, and this allows you to start saving things to your project. The reason why this is useful to us is that we can say npm install React. It'll go install React for us and it'll store the version of React that we're using in the project, so that when I share this with you later, you can go install it and you'll get the same version of React or a compatible version of React that I'm using. But I don't have to save React in my repo, so we don't have to have a trillion copies of React floating out on GitHub, right? We get one copy of React. And like if React has a critical vulnerability, like stuff like that happens, they're able to patch it so that next time you go to install, you'll get the patched version, not the insecure version. Okay, hopefully that worked for you. If not, you'll probably have to go to the Node.js page and install Node, however you choose to do that. But again, and make sure you end up on Node 20.6 or above, please. Feel free to use PNPM. It does relatively the same thing. I'd be very, very confident that it would work just as well. Yarn, less so these days. I haven't used Yarn in a long time. You might have noticed when I've been writing code here that like if I do something like this and let's close this. Come on. So if I do like this and I put a bunch of space and then whenever I hit save, oh, it doesn't like, did I?
Slash online 27.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. It just fixes all of my spacing for me automatically. I cannot be bothered to handle spacing anymore. Like that process in my brain that thinks about code formatting has just been shut down, and at this point it's been shut down for so long it's atrophied. So I literally cannot fathom how to write well-formatted code anymore because Prettier just does it for me automatically every single time. So all Prettier is the code formatter. My least favorite thing is a bike ship. It's my least favorite thing to talk about. So that's why I put this empty object here. Is like whatever someone else chooses for me, I don't care. As long as it gets formatted in a uniform way, I don't care. So that's what that is. I have a VS Code extension here. So if you're following along in VS Code, I'm going to suggest you install the Prettier code formatter.
Yeah, I already have that.
There's several, so make sure you get the one that's officially from Prettier, and then go into one of your JS files and just you can hit. It's either Shift Command P on a Mac or Control Shift P on Linux and Windows, and then choose Format Document. If this is your first time doing it, it's going to say like, hey, you need to choose a formatter, and just choose Prettier, and then that'll set that up so that formats your documents. And then if you hit Command comma or Control comma, and then you want to do Format on Save, and just make sure that that one's checked. Then you're ready to roll. And then you'll get exactly the same thing. So you can just like mess up formatting, make it terrible. Let's de-indent everything because it makes everyone ill to look at that code. And you just save it and it just fixes itself. I know I want everyone to use VS Code, But I also used to work with Primeagen, so not everyone's going to use VS Code. It turns out, right? So you need to set up all of your projects to work with anyone's tools, not just your own tool. So let's go ahead and set up Prettier to work with everybody.
Hey, nice work.
npm install dash save dev, or if you're lazy like me, npm I dash capital T is the exact same thing, and we're going to put Prettier. And you can see here we have a dev dependency, right? So this.
Okay, let's go to install now the dependency of Prettier at that moment. Okay, again, this is part of the configuration and all that kind of stuff, but it's important. npm install dev Prettier, followed by this particular version. All right, that's quite interesting. The version. If we take a look at this, the package JSON, we already installed that, right?
This is this only needs to be installed in development environments, not for production environments. That's what the dev dependency means. And you're going to do Prettier -- write. That's probably a pretty good list. If you have, we're not going to have any TypeScript in this, so you could leave this JSX, TS, TSX, whatever file formats you wanted to look at.
You can.
That's probably a pretty good list. If you have,
as a way to call,
we're not going to have any TypeScript in this, so you could leave the TypeScript stuff out. But JS, JSX, CSS, you could put HTML in here as well. Prettier doesn't work with everything, but they're actually expanding it to a lot of other languages now. Make sure you need a comma there at the end.
So
and now we should be able to run npm run
help you to auto format your code. In other words,
that's what the scripts are for. It's basically like, please remember these bash commands for me, so later, so I don't have to remember how to write this.
It help you to.
You can just say npm run format, and it will run that for you. Oh, and I need a closing quote here. Make sure you have the quotes here. The backslash is just an escape character, right? Reason why you want the quotes here is that you don't want your shell to do the file expansion. You want the actual, you want that passed in literally as a string to Prettier, so that it can go do all the finding of the correct files. Now mine's already running, right? Because every time I save the file, it's running. But you can see, so it says unchanged here. But if I had something to change there, it would say.
So I guess I now create a branch for, say, tooling. Right, tooling.
We are going to talk about linting. Who is pumped about linting? Get out. No, just kidding. We are going to talk about linting. Who is pumped about linting? Get out. No, just kidding.
Who is gonna pumping linting? Get out. Okay, so here we got is this one. Let's say get status. Here say get add everything. Hey, let's go to now add a no model here to say, hey, you know what? touch.get ignore. All right. Where inside of that folder, I want to say, hey. Get ignored and say no models. I don't want to bring anything of this. You know, anything that is remotely to get models, please don't. Why? Because you don't want to pull the entire dependency of this repo. You just only wants to push a copy. That anytime that you download a copy, you in your own machines download that repo, right? Download all the necessary dependency that it needs to be done. So here at everything here, right, we say get status, get commit with a message and say why this is modified. Okay, no. Okay, get commit with a message here. So add Prettier code formatting. All right, add Prettier code formatting. You say then git push. If you want to know what's going on here, you can say, hey, git. All right, I want to take a look at the log here of what this is all about. We create now this tooling where I want to check out the first 7. It's a cat, git cat, cat file here. All right. I think is with p purify the output, right? And here you're not able to see, perhaps not right now. Now you do. And here, because I already create now, let me actually do this. Git log, git log in a pretty fine way. Say pretty full. Decorate, right? Git log decorate. Say 1 line, right? So here we're able to see is what we have pushed into Git, this annoying versions management that is going to be helpful for us to anytime that we add now a new change on top of this and so on and so forth. We can now take a snapshot of everything so we can replay that application at that moment at a time. So that's powerful. That's one of the things that you want to develop as you go on, you move on as a developer, also to keep up with your soft skills and understand how all of these particular tools works behind the scenes. So we want is to just only cat file for this. And what we're looking here is now is the structure of this particular node, which is an acyclic graph. That's the data structure of Git that help you to know at each one of those steps, where each one of those commit snapshot of your application, it allows you to recreate your app at that moment in time. That's mind-blowing, because each one of them, what it does is to have a reference to the previous state of your app, and now at the current state of your app. And 3 contain is the structure. Let me do this. And 3 contains now is what were the file that was modified here by saying git cat a file prettify this. You say, hey, I have several files that I mutate here or that I modify, right? Interesting. That I modify, and look at this. You can think of 3 as the parent directory, you know, because if you take a look now at this commit here, you want to inspect that git cat file with a p, and then now what you can see is that each one of those nodes contains information that points to the file, which is here, that aka it can point to a folder or a directory here that points now to the content of the file. And if you want to look at that file, and I know this might go beyond the scope of this React, what was that? -p. You can now look at the content of the application, right? This is pretty neat because, again, it does go beyond the scope of today's video. There is also a very interesting course that you can take a look at Git. I will suggest you to take a look. So yeah, let's move on.
Just kidding. I got mixed feelings about linting. I've gone all over the map on linting. I used to be, and if you watch like Complete Intro to React v2, like there comes in this like different Brian Holt character that's just like, we're gonna lint the hell out of this project. It's gonna look like one person wrote it, and I was very much on that train of like, let's let the tools control you. And I've come all the way back the other way. And like if you like watch like React v7, you get like this like hippie brand. It's like free love and no linting, right? Where I'm just like, write whatever code you feel like, dude, right? And now I've come back more to like help me catch very common and very easy to miss bugs, and otherwise leave me the hell alone. This actually just kind of applies to my general thought process on building dev tools of your developer has something in mind that they want to express into code, and don't interrupt them unless they're actually going to, unless you're helping them, right? Like just getting someone to write code in a certain format because you feel like it is adding more and more friction, and it's more distance between someone expressing their idea and code. And so that's why I'm much more careful these days to be very light on the linting side, and just like if it's not important, don't do it, right? Okay. So we're gonna do prettier, and people frequently ask me like, what's the difference between linting and or ESLint and prettier? ESLint is linting, obviously. Linting is much more like semantics and syntax and content focused, where you're saying things like you have to alphabetize all of your imports, which is like one of my very least favorite rules that you can enforce in ESLint. But it's things like that. It's things where you're enforcing an opinion on someone. Like it could be totally valid code, but you're saying, I don't want you to do this. One of the ones that I do find useful is don't use any globals, right? Because usually that means that like you misspelled something, so it's going to reach for a global as opposed to, you know, finding the one that you actually intended to name it, right? Prettier is just formatting. It's just white space and new lines. It does not enforce anything about the code. It's just making sure that all of the white space ends up in the right place. That's all that Prettier does. There's some overlap that you can basically have ESLint do some of what Prettier does, but if you're using both tools, Prettier is much better at formatting. Leave the formatting to Prettier. Just have lint for all of the linting rules. Yeah, Mark.
Have you heard of OXLint?
I have. I might even mention it down here. I do. Look at that. I think this is actually supposed to be. Is it supposed to be a 0? No. Okay. No, I was right. It is. There's 2 projects to keep an eye on here. Is OXLint and Biome. Biome used to be called Rome. Oxlint, I think, is this is all written in Rust. And there's, I think, a couple of other projects. They're so new, and they both really lean on ESLint anyway for its rules. So I'm interested. I'm keeping an eye on it. The creator of Vue and Vite, Evan Yu, started a new company around Oxlint and Vite and all these tools. So I'm interested, but they're still so new. In this course, I'm trying to teach you to be job ready today with React, and I'm not teaching anything that's that far out on the edge. So look at it, admire it, help, but if you're going to your day job, ship ESLint. Like it started a new company around Oxlint and Vite and all these tools, so I'm interested, but they're still so new. In this course, I'm trying to teach you to be job ready today with React, and I'm not teaching anything that's that far out on the edge. So.
Okay. So, well, I was gonna make a quick pause here, and we'll be right back. All right, and we are back. So now, what are we gonna do here? Well, after after adding Prettier to this, okay, and. Yeah, after adding Prettier to this, and yeah, there we got it. So after adding Prettier to this, right, and yeah, this is the code base, right? Our workspace is clean, as you can see. Well, the next stuff is to add now a linter, right? So we add Prettier, which is the code formatting, and now ESLint, which is to fix the known common JavaScript issues, right?
Look at
get
it,
into this.
admire it, help. But if you're going to your day job, ship ESLint. Like it's just the safe choice right now, and it's a perfectly good piece of software. Okay. Yeah, like a good example.
That's interesting. Oxlint. Oxlint. 50 to 100 times faster than ESLint and scale with numbers of CPU cores. Benchmark. Over 500 rules without growing lists from ESLint, TypeScript, ESLint plugin. Okay, it comes with the GNOME. Let me actually show you this. It actually comes with the GNOME. What it is? Yeah, it also comes with the GNOME linter here. OXLint is designed to catch erroneous or useless code without requiring any configuration, right? So it's already used ESLint, TypeScript, ESLint plugin React, ESLint plugin Jest, ESLint plugin Unicore, ESLint plugin GSX Ally, and many more. Support OXLint source JSON, nested configuration file, command disabling, automatic fixes, right? Language support JavaScript and TypeScript by their extension, GS, MGS, CX, GSX, TX, MTS, okay. Script, Vue, Astro, and Svelte, and it is allegedly 50 to 100 times faster than ESLint. Bench JavaScript linter, right? Time and range. MacBook Pro M3 Max, Mac M1, 8 performance and 2 efficiency. This is benchmark 1 and ESLint here. 13 Gen Intel i9. Okay, it's interesting because it's actually the same. It's a little bit more performant than that. Using aux and biome. Again, is interesting, okay, but it's way too early. Okay, the JavaScript oxidation compiler. Holy moly, Bombarder. Okay, good. Motion.github.io. Okay, never heard of this. Definitely never heard of this. Anyway, Bosching here. We have Graphite mergeability check, but this is there particularly in Matthias Bind. Interesting. Matthias Binds actually works here. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. That's interesting. That's very, very interesting. Anyway, but again, OXLint is a ROS base. Is a ROS based compiler. It's a ROS based compiler for TypeScript and JavaScript. That's interesting. For deployment, Anyway, for deployment, keep using ESLint. That's right. Yep. I think that'll be good. Okay, cool. Cool. Mm. Okay.
Example here is like you want to force people to never use with. Like if with is technically valid JavaScript, it was in ES3, right? But you never want to have with in a modern code base. It would just make zero sense, right? So you can have ESLint say like, hey, you're using with. No one uses with. Please stop doing that. Okay. I'm going to have you install ESLint and these tools at specific versions. The reason why I'm going to have you do that now and for the rest of the course is like, this course is a moment in time, and they're definitely going to release new changes and breaking changes. And I want people to stay on tools that I have verified work together. So feel free to try and install later versions of ESLint or React or whatever you want, but just know when they release new minor or major versions of these things, it's probably going to break, right? There is a massive difference between ESLint 8 and ESLint 9. React v8 uses ESLint 8, and I had to rewrite this entire portion of the course because it totally changed, right? So go ahead and grab this. I would just copy and paste it directly. Go to your project, and we're just going to install -d, right, for development, ESLint at 991, ESLint config at 910, and globals at 15.9.0. Cool. Again, you'll notice in our package.json, we now have a bunch more dev dependencies. Cool. Now, we're going to create a file in the root of our project. It's going to be called eslint.config.mjs.
Oh my God, we're using now.
Now, every version of this course
MJS.
previously used eslint.rc.json. That is no longer supported. You actually have to do it this way now. And you might be asking, why is it MJS? Because otherwise it assumes that it's common JS, and we want to use
Exactly.
ES modules.
You want to use this ES
So
model.
the MJS here means that we're going to do import and export as opposed to require, right? So that's why. And we are going to start writing a little ESLint config.
That's
Import
interesting.
JS
Because
from
here we are about to
ESLint
use
/JS.
this.
Import
okay.
globals.
So here we're about to
from
use this now
globals.
ESLint version 9.
And import
It's compatible with
prettier
React 18
from
in this version.
ESLint
right?
config.
And
prettier.
then we're gonna create now
Right.
a.
This is one of my favorite tricks
ESLint. Let me actually
with just VS Code and TypeScript.
pause here a little bit. Right, you say touch ESLint, right? Touch ESLint.config.mjs. I am quite familiar with this because I have seen this before. And then you go to the ESLint config, and because this is a JavaScript file, ex6, the question is that what are we gonna do here? You know, what is the configuration of this file? The Airbnb config is pretty much what you want, all right? And I think this has been here for decades and a decade exactly. Holy moly! All right. So you got a issue, you got a pull request, and all that kind of stuff. And issues, Airbnb and the code here. yeah, my question is like, where do you get this? Do you know, where do you get this configuration? Again, I know that, where do you get these configurations, my friend? That's what I want to know. Where do you get this configuration? If I go to ESLint here, that I'm going to apply is a set of rules here. The pluggable linting utility for JavaScript and JSX. Find issue, fix problem automatically, configure everything. But again, use ESLint in your project, extend ESLint, integrate ESLint, contribute, maintain. But use ESLint, rules reference. Oh, this is the rules reference, not quite. Oh, it also comes with MCC server setup. What? It's an open standard that enables AI to interact with external tools and service through a unified interface. The ESLint CLI contains an MPC server that you can register with your co-editor. I can register my co-editor to allow LLMs to use ESLint directly. Again, something that go beyond the scope of today's video, right? Rules reference, formatters, reference, integrations, rule deprecations, migrating, and I want to look at this. Oh, here you go. For example, one of the questions is, where does your code run? If you select browser, then your configuration file will contain the definition for global variables found in web browser. Here's an example. But again, this is the GS recommended. Oh, because they changed that to MGS. Okay. Configuration ensure that all rules marked as recommended on the rule page will be turned on. Alternatively, you can use configuration that other has created by searching for ESLint configs on npmgs.com. ESLint will not link your code unless you extend from shared configuration or explicitly turn rules on in your configuration. Okay. So, manual setup. Okay, so at least it gives you now a document about this and how you can at least create that. That's interesting. So if we copy this, some of them I use Bond, PNPN, Yarn, NPM. I'm gonna go with the safest choice, right? Create JavaScript configuration files, touch ESLint config, right? Add configuration to ESLint config.js. File refers to configure ESLint documentation to learn how to add rules, custom configuration plugins, and more. Import the find config from ESLint config, import GS from ESLint/GS, and there you got it. Okay, so if we copy this instructions inside of the, if we copy this instruction inside of our configuration file, right? Okay, which is here. Okay, makes sense. Now what we're saying is that, hey, whatever ESLint config you have, which is something that I installed right here, is gonna look for that particular package called ESLint config. If you take a look at the config, the package JSON, here you have is the ESLint config, Okay. In this ESLint config, which is something that we install, ESLint and ESLint/GS. All right. There you get it. So in our case, we already installed ESLint, that particular version. Prettier is something called globals, right? So he was saying is like, hey, I want to get the configuration file, which is an object, or a function here, and then whatever is the ESLint here. So I'm gonna pass now collections of what extensions here, configuration, where you say, hey, this is one of the ESLint rules that I want to apply to all of these files, and there's another one, and there's another one, and there's another one. So in our case, right, because this is using something like this, right, where it say I'm gonna use this GS lint, is he's not going to use this the configuration because he wants to export this, and that's another configuration here, which to me seems quite odd. But I'm going to say this import ESLint.lint or .config, and I'm going to export this as a common model, right? That'll be an array of this gsconfig recommended. Okay. So you have now this set of recommended from GS, and also is from the file that you want to apply. For example, global browser and global nodes. Let's get into this a little bit, just at least to understand.
In general, this is not TypeScript, but I still love completions when I'm writing code, right? So you can say at type import ESLint .linter.config array. Now you can see the 2 stars here in the slash. This is a comment, right?
Exactly.
But this is letting VS Code know this is this type. Please give me all the type completions for this.
Okay, this is a comment for VS Code. The following is a comment for VS Code. Okay, this is the type of import from ESLint.linter.config, and I want autocompletion here.
So now I can say export default and give it an array. And now I'm going to have proper type completions inside of this. This is totally optional. You can totally leave this off. If you're in something like Sublime or TextMate, I don't know why you're on TextMate. I have questions about that. But you probably wouldn't use this. This probably wouldn't be very helpful for you. But for VS Code specifically, this is really quite nice. So now I can say js.config.
This is the reason why I actually taking note of this particular code, because some of this stuff can be applied to my own life cycle and stuff like that, and so on and so forth. Okay.
And I'm gonna give it.
And also another thing is that I'm dedicating time to this because I want to absorb, to abstract, to get all of the juicy stuff out of this.
Recommended. So we're going to export this array of rules for ESLint. This is their new flat config configuration style. I find it configuration. I find it confusing, but this is the way you have to do it now. So we're stuck with it. So you export multiple different configurations, and it kind of builds one upon the other. So this will be executed, then the second one, then the third one, then the fourth one. So the lower it is in the list, the last it is executed. So one thing is this prettier config always has to be last. Just keep that in mind, just drill it into your brain. The prettier config always has to be last. Why is that? The prettier config, all it does is turn off stuff. It doesn't add anything new. All it says is like, don't check formatting, don't check this kind of format.
Add prettier at last. Add prettier always, at least in this configuration, always at last, because it adds because it removes configurations.
Why is that? The prettier config, all it does is turn off stuff. It doesn't add anything new. All it says is like, don't check format.
Okay, because it turns off stuff. For example, don't check formatting.
Don't check this kind of formatting. Don't check new lines. Don't check any of that kind of.
So don't check new lines, co-formatting.
The stuff. All this does is turn off formatting, which is useful. Otherwise, you get ESLint yelling at you. That's like, hey, you didn't format this correctly, and this will prevent it from yelling at you for stuff that doesn't matter. Okay, we're going to put our configuration here in the middle. So js.configs.recommended. This is just a very small subset of like non-controversial ESLint rules, right?
Okay. So this is a non-controversial okay, this is a non-controversial JavaScript rules. Or ES in this case, exactly. ESLint rules.
They're just purely value add. I've never had a problem with the recommended one. If you want everything that ESLint can check for, you can do .all, but you are a glutton for punishment if you're doing that. It's going to check things that you don't care about, I promise. So, you know what? Again, I'm not your mom, do whatever you want. But I'm not going to put that in there because of
You know what? I know your mom.
Punishment if you're doing that. It's going to check things that you don't care about, I promise. So, you know what? Again, I'm not your mom, do whatever you want.
I know your mom, do whatever you want.
But I'm not going to put that in there because it annoys me so quickly. Okay, we're going to tell what files. So okay, again, this type thing right here, the reason why it knows here, this files, is from that comment up
From
there,
that
right? Which
comment
I find extremely useful.
Like that.
Okay, and I'm going to tell it to check for everything to do with .js files. And if you want to get ahead of the game here, we're eventually going to be doing JSX, so you might as well just check that in there as well. If you're doing TS and TSX, you put that in here as well, right? So, okay, language options. We are going to say, here's the globals that we want you to check or be aware of.
So it is.
We're going to do globals.browser and globals.node. Why this? It's so that when we go into like here, we can say things like window or document, right? Things that are globals in those environments. If you don't import and add those, it's going to be like, hey, I don't know what document is, right? So that's what globals is. Sorry, back in here. This is just the spread operator, right? So we could do like some sort of like object.assign here, right? But we can just use the spread operator. This is a little bit cleaner. This is just going to be the union of browser and node here, right? As one object. That's all the globals that we need for this project. Parser options. ECMA features. And we need JSX. And I think that should be good for us for a little bit. This is just going to allow us to use JSX, which we're about to do, right? Without this, ESLint's still going to be okay because it can parse JSX, but it's not going to understand how React is working and how it's importing things correctly. So this becomes important. All right. So again, let's go back into our package.json and make it so that this can run ESLint. We're going to say lint And now we can just say ESLint. You used to have to put like this long string associated with it, but now it reads its config properly and you don't have to do that. So now if we come in here and we say npm run lint,
Lint is gonna
you'll see a
call
bunch of
that.
these errors, right?
Hmm.
And my notes here say that this should fix it if you say ESPN, wow. Yeah, something on the mind, I guess. Run lint dash 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 fix. So this dash dash just means like, hey, I want to pass this
ESLint.
into ESLint. So this will actually end up running ESLint dash dash fix. If you don't put this dash dash in there, it's going to apply dash dash fix to npm, which doesn't make any sense, right? So that's why you need the dash dash. Yeah, I didn't think so. So what's something that I could fix automatically? I don't remember. But fix some of your linting errors can be fixed automatically. Like it contains transformations that'll just fix some of these things for you. We have nothing to fix right now, so that doesn't really help us that much. But that's kind of a fun trick to do sometimes. Another one, if you're debugging this, is debug is super useful. You get a lot of output of like ESLint working. It's telling you everything that it's parsing. It's telling you all the errors that it's found. It's telling you all the rules that it's loading. So you can see these are all of the checks that it's running.
All of the check that it's doing there.
Which is
Non-controversial.
kind of cool.
Yeah, the non-control.
Yeah, so I mean, here's a good one, no debugger.
rules about it.
Let's say, I don't know if you've ever used this before. VS Code has a very useful debugger built into it. We won't be using it today, but like I use it quite a bit for my Node projects. And so now I think if I say npm run lint, it should give me an error around not using the debugger. Yeah, unexpected debugger statement.
Mm-hmm.
It'll catch things like that. You want this to error, right? Because I'm going to put this in there and I want this to stay here while I'm using it, but I don't ever want to ship this to production, right? So that's something that lint will catch for you. Oh yeah, let's install the extension. There is an ESLint extension. I will say that of the common extensions I recommend people install, this one is the most finicky sometimes, the ESLint one. It should look like this. It's
Finicky.
official from Microsoft. It just gets bent out of shape sometimes. And so if you find that like it's not, or it's highlighting something that it should or not highlighting something that it should, a good restart will usually fix a lot of stuff, either of VS Code itself or the whole computer. I don't know. Definitely one of the ones that annoys me the most, and sometimes I just end up disabling it because it's so annoying.
The purpose of the npm script you wrote is only if somebody doesn't have Prettier installed in their editor, correct?
It's amongst the reasons that I would do it.
Yeah.
Probably the chief reason is so that I can now run it in CI/CD, right? So I can run it as like a GitHub action. So then it won't check in it won't deploy my code if it's like failing lint or failing Prettier. That's probably the biggest reason, because almost everyone that I work with or have worked with has some version of Prettier or lint built into their editor, and they just fix it on the fly. And there's a few holdouts that'll just run it right before they commit, right? So those are the two chief reasons I do it.
So in this case, we're using is now lint.
Mostly, I want you to do a git ignore at this point in the course.
Right, which is the ESLint. ESLint. Plain, just like that. And if you want to run this, you say npm run lint dash fix, right? And of course, it detects all of these particular errors from that, right? Like React and React DOM. Hey, it didn't define any of this. If you can now take a look at this to have a more completed deep yeah, that's right. If you want to have now a more verbose output like this, so you can see what it's doing behind the scenes. Like, hey, I'm running as a CLI and getting as a debug flag, and they say, hey, you use flag config true, running on files, right? And then I say, hey, ESLint using the file patterns from the ESLint config, then load those configuration, find the configuration URL, and delete the cache if you have anyone, right? So now it is time for us to load all of the rules here, like constructor super, for direction, getter, returning, no async promise executor, no case declarations, no class assign, no compare next zero, no condition. All of this. It's like, hey, I think that the console should be another one. No count assign, no counts binary expression, no counts, no control, no debugger, no empty. That's interesting. Unsafe, but at least is the non-controversial. That's right. The non-controversial rules in JavaScript, and then it's going to pass through this. You say apply this source code fixer. There you go. Okay. Good.
So Git is obviously our source tracking for our project, and mostly I just want you to make a
Of course, I already add Git to this, so
Git ignore file for stuff. This will really help out VS Code to be faster for just a bunch of stuff, because VS Code relies heavily on your Git ignore being useful. And I just want you to, it's good. All of my projects, even if they're not making it to GitHub, I still have a habit of committing and tracking and all that kind of stuff. And most of it ends up on GitHub. I have so much private garbage on GitHub anyway. So anyway, the first thing that you always ignore in your Git ignore, especially if you're on a Mac, and especially if you're not on a Mac, is dsstore. This shows up in so many projects. It's hilarious. It's a file that's auto-generated by Mac OS. And it's, as far as I know, so if you just drag a file here, it's the positioning in the Mac OS window, and that's what it's in dsstore. It might be other stuff too.
Okay, the dsstore. So question, did I upload it? Exactly, it's not there, which is good. Okay. No, I don't have them. Interesting. So let me add that, that dsstore.
But anyway, that's why dsstore ends up in every file.
dsstore. If you're in a Mac OS, dsstore.
Node modules, that should also be one that you immediately ignore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is stuff that you don't want to check in. You just want to npm install it every single time. Do we have a dist in this? I can't remember, but we'll just copy what I have in here. Dist. Do we have data? I don't remember either, but .m files, you always want to ignore those. Coverage, we will have one of those.
Okay, we're gonna have this for distribution. .m file. Okay, coverage. Interesting. To run some coverage on this.
And you can ignore the .vs code or not. That's up to you. I tend to ignore it. So the .vs code directory is if you want to make configurations specifically for your project, when you open it, it'll generate this .vs code directory. It's up to you if you want to check that in or not. If you think that's useful to share with your coworkers, then check it in. Sometimes it is. I can think of an example it's a Python project. You want to make sure that everyone's using Pylance with your project, right? You would have a .vs code directory that would tell their projects, please install Pylance for them, right? Up to you. Yep, and if you need more instruction on this, Primeagen definitely has a course, right? Yep, everything you know about Git.
And also Nina's.
Nina's is also great too. Yeah, I hired Nina at Reddit. We worked together for a long time, and then we worked together course, right? Yep, everything you know about Git.
I already actually took that particular course, especially on Git, and it was amazing of how it actually you can explore what it's doing here and how memory efficient is Git when it comes to store the state of the application as a snapshot. All right, so anytime that you make a commit, what you're doing is to add the new set of changes. So what it does is to add those new set of state changes that help you to recreate the entire application. That's pretty neat, man. That's mind blowing. That's mind blowing, and also help you to keep track of what you're doing and how you're doing on all that kind of stuff. We also went through the branching strategy. How can we use rebase, for example?
Also Nina's
is also great too. Yeah, I hired Nina at Reddit. We worked together for a long time, and then we worked together again at Microsoft. The last thing we'll do is run git init. It might yell at you. Oh no, it's fine. Okay, so this will initiate an a empty Git project. Even though I'm inside of my Git project, it's kind of an onion. It goes to the nearest Git project in there. And you can see here I have a .git directory. So that's kind of up to you. If you want to just track as part of my repo that you were in, right? Because I'm just in the complete intro to React v9 projects, right? And I have Padre Genos in here. Or if you want to have your own separate, this is my repo that I built, you can get in it in there and you can track it as part of that. That's totally up to you.
Yep, I want to. And I think that'll be all right.
Up to you.
I think that'll be all. And let's going to now go with.
Let's talk
Vite.
about Vite.
The model.
And I did check,
bundler.
it is pronounced that way. You can call it Vite, but it's supposed to be French for quick. That's what I'm told. I don't speak French. So Vite, pretty cool project from the creator of Vue. What I found kind of interesting about Vite is it's not actually the bundler. The bundler is Rollup, right? And it has been since the beginning, I think. They just put in a lot of much better developer experience around Rollup, because Rollup is a difficult thing to tune and get working correctly. Rollup is great, especially for bundling modules and things that you're going to publish, but it's not made for developer experience. It's made for performance. It's why I taught Parcel for so long as part of this course. I still like Parcel. You're very welcome to use Parcel. But Vite has kind of just won at this point, right? Everyone tends to use just Vite. There's not really a lot of questions. The tooling around it just keeps getting better and better. You'll see when we get to the testing part of it. Vite makes Vitest very easy to use.
Exactly, which is.
And they're just making it better. They founded a company around it now, and they're going to change from roll up to roll down as their bundler. Roll down, which is a Rust-based bundler for JavaScript. Kind of cool. So it's going to do a bunch of stuff for us. Right now, we had one file being imported into one index.html directory, and that works with no build step. But now what happens if we want to have multiple files, right? And we want to import in, and we want to pull in different libraries and stuff like that. The complexity just ratchets up like exponentially. And so Vite kind of helps us tame that down to just like, you can just kind of read and write files as if they were already present, which ends up being really helpful. It makes pulling things from NPM that depth, right? Being imported into one index.html directory, and that works with no build step. But now what happens if we want to have multiple files, right? And we want to import in, and we want to pull in different libraries and stuff like that. The complexity just ratchets up like exponentially. And so Vite kind of helps us tame that down to just like, you can just kind of read and write files as if they were already present, which ends up being really helpful. And so Vite kind of helps us tame that down to just like.
Okay, Vite kind of help us tame that down.
Like, you can just kind of read and write files as if they were already present, which ends up being really helpful. It makes pulling things from tame that down to just like.
So Vite kind of help us tame that down, so you can just kind of read and
You
write.
can just kind of read and write files as if they were already present, which ends up being really helpful.
As if they're.
It makes pulling things from NPM very easy, and it'll handle everything like minifying our code, all the other optimizing techniques that you don't really want to have to think about. They've already thought about that for you, so you don't have to worry about it. So yeah, previous versions we used Parcel, awesome projects. They also might use
Atlassian.
Rollup. No, I think they actually wrote their own bundler. So anyway, Parcel's cool, and the old mainstay Webpack, which has been around forever, right? So we're going to do this, though. We're going to get Vite at 5.4.2 and Vite.js plugin forever, right?
I'm going to make a quick pause here, especially when we talk about Vite or model bundlers, right? We went through, look at Prettier, ESLint, Prettier, and Git. Okay. There's not too much to say rather than look at the configuration file of how you can actually take that, right? For example, the tooling, right? Okay. Um, but yeah, there's nothing too much to say about Prettier. So check out the the code in Prettier, right? Check out the repo. Check out the repo code in Prettier. You can take a look at this, right? Or we can say something like this. Say, hey, this one. Yep. What's next? The linter, but I don't want to add. Or here with linter, there is nothing too much to add. You can say git status, git add everything here, git status. Exactly. So git commit with a message here, and then you say add ESLint, right? You can say git push origin, or in this case is Papagino's origin. It's gonna push is tooling, because we haven't set, so because Git doesn't know which brand it wants to sync. It has something by default, which is the main, but I don't want to do that. You can define is what will be the upstream to upload your change, to submit your change. So now that we got this one, right? We go a little bit back. We have now add ESLint for this. And the only difference, or the only substantial the only substantial difference here is that ESLint now allow ESLint version 9 I'll now allow you to define in .mgs file, file. So ES models, right? Which is great, way much better than what we have before, right? Again, check out the repo. So far, so goddamn good. Cool. Now, with Vite, okay, now let's get, and then we're gonna talk about Vite. Git, I think that I have that. Git, I think I have that. Something like this with Git. What's Git practical advanced with Git? I already take some notes out of this with Git. So Git is this one, you know. Git is this one. Git, you got it. Git is a version distributed system control, or is a distributed version control system that I already took a course about it, right? There you go. Is a distributed version control that I took a course about. Okay, and now with Vite.
We're going to do this though. We're going to get Vite at 542 and Vite.js plugin React. These are kind of our two minimum down as their bundler. Roll down, which is a Rust.
That's interesting. So there is something called roll down. Okay. Fast Rust-based bundler for JavaScript with rollup compatible API. Brought to you by Void. And I think next generation tooling for JavaScript. It's all about JavaScript, bro. It's all about JavaScript, bro. OX, this is a compiler or a JavaScript language tool change, a bundler, next generation test runner, and the build tool for the web. There is a lot of stuff going on. That's interesting. That's mind-blowing. We are building the unified high-performance toolchain for JavaScript, including parser, transformer, resolver, linter, formatter, minify bundler, test runner, and meta framework support. Our project has already trusted by millions of developers. We believe that next generation of JavaScript toolchain should be unified, high-performance, composable, and runtime agnostic. Runtime agnostic, whether it's on the browser or on the server or on any other environment. Runtime agnostic. But this is the next generation of tool change. Why do we need a tool chain? That's a good question. And they create now a company called Void Zero. Broad server running. Void Zero and Nox Labs join forces on Vite DevTools. Okay, now we're talking. And the team. In Netherlands. I get it. Okay. Cool.
Based bundler for JavaScript. It's kind of cool. So it's going to do a bunch of stuff for us. Right now, we had one file being imported into one index.html directory, and that works with no build step. But now what happens if we want to have multiple files, right? And we want to import in, and we want to pull in different libraries and stuff like that. The complexity just ratchets up like exponentially. And so Vite kind of helps us tame that down to just like, you can just kind of read and write files as if they were already present, which ends up being really helpful. It makes pulling things from NPM very easy, and it'll handle everything like minifying our code, all the other optimizing techniques that you don't really want to have to think about. They've already thought about that for you, so you don't have to worry about it. So yeah, previous versions, we use Parcel, awesome projects. They also might use roll up. No, I think they actually wrote their own bundler. So anyway, Parcel's cool. And the old mainstay Webpack, which has been around forever, right?
Which has been around forever, right?
So we're going to do this though. We're going to get Vite at 5.4.2 and Vite.js plugin React.
Yeah,
These
which
are kind of our
has been
two
around
minimum
forever, right?
requirements to get started with Vite. So we're just going to copy and paste that in here.
But it's in this particular version of
And that
Vite
should install our stuff for us.
that allow this.
Okay. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to go to index.html. Close this for a second. We want to get
Then
rid
we're going
of
to import
these two script tags.
It's going to get rid of the React.
And then from here, you have to do one more thing. You're going to have to say type equals module. You need to let Vite know that you're going to be working with modules. And actually, I don't think it even works with CommonJS anymore. They basically just said, like, look, if you want to be using Vite, you got to be on ES modules. That's what we've been talking about this entire time. That's all. Shouldn't be a big deal. But yeah, make sure you add that type equals module or it's going to yell at you. Okay. Now, make a vite.config.js files. And we are going to do import define config, not from rollup, from Vite.
From Vite.
We're going to import React from @Vite.js plugin /React. Cool. And then we're going to export default define config. And we're going to have plugins. Again, I just love this auto completion. And it's going to be an array. We're going to give it React, which is a function that you have to invoke. And you should end up with something like this. So at its most basic, Vite handles most of this stuff out of the box. So you don't really have to configure it very much. The only thing that we have to say is, like, this is a React project. You're going to have to do React type things. And that's it. Okay.
So here what it's doing is say, after I install that Vite and the Vite plugin for React, to let know Vite, hey, so the problem that Vite solve is that dealing with the complexity of, as you add more and more files that are linking each other's, so the complexity grows exponentially. You want to kind of tame that by having everything in one place when you need to read or write on it. So, in other words, Vite not only act as a model bundler or as a model linker, right? But also as a server that is doing some optimizations at development time that help us is to improve the developer feedback. So anytime you make a change, it will actually automatically detect those changes and therefore now serve the content with the new change on top of that, and also help you to integrate is the testing and the building pipeline. So you have one single unified pipelines where you can now deploy, or you have one single tool where you can now run your tests and deploy your code, right? So build the code is for this two step. So run your tests and build the app, right? So again, it's quite sexy, but it's also something that a lot of companies are actually using now, and it becomes now de facto for a lot of these web frameworks out there. React Native is one of them, you know. So now let's going to create is our vite.config.js file, right? So you say vite.config.js file, and here we're going to now import the define config from Vite, no rollup, from Vite, all right, followed by the React but from the Vite plugin, I think it is the plugin. The plugin. So this is Vitess plugin React. Okay, and then here we say, hey, define the config. All right, where I'm going to pass is now an object to this function. That'll be the plugins. I love this auto completion here as a collection of React, as a collection of plugins here. In this case, React elements. But I think that we need to export this, right? At least this function. So anytime that you call this, you now can do as it is.
Let's go back to our terminal.
So if we save this,
and we're going to do npm I or install whatever you want, but not the -D, because we're going to install some production dependencies, not dev dependencies. As a total side note, it really doesn't matter very much, because you're always going to build your project before it goes out to production. So whether it's a dev dependency or not, everything gets installed every time. But some people find that distinction extremely important. So npm install React, we're going to do at 18.3.1 and React at, React-DOM at 18.3.1.
exactly, React.
Now again,
and the
people are
React
asking me like, why are we not doing 19? 19 still is not officially stable yet. It's in release candidate, it's stable-ish, and we'll talk about it at the end of the course. But once React 19 is stable, then we will come back and we'll do complete intro to React v10. Will this course work with 19? Almost certainly. They're not changing very much, they're not taking very much out. Everything that I am teaching you today applies 100% to 19. They've already told us all the stuff they're taking out. I'm not teaching you any of that stuff. It's just that. So extremely likely that if 19 is out by the time that you're watching this course, you could just use 19. But if you do 18.3.1, I can guarantee you everything I tested with 18. And also everything applies to 19. So have no fear of taking this even with React 18. Interesting. Says that there's a security vulnerability. This, by the way, by the time that you watch this course, there will certainly be like lots of security vulnerabilities. That's very normal. I'm not telling you to like install like a Bitcoin miner on your computer. Just mine, not anyone else's, right? So don't worry too much about that. I mean, if you want to, you can see if npm audit fix will work. Sometimes it doesn't. Oh, look, I did it. We fixed it. I fixed the internet. All right. All this does is it goes and finds a package, sees if there's a patch version that's available that just fixes the problem. If it does, then it installs that. That's all it does. Okay, let's go use Vite. So we're gonna go to our source directory, and that's it. I fixed the internet.
npm audit fix. Three severity vulnerabilities. No problem. npm audit fix, and it doesn't work, no problem, but we're all going to have that vulnerability.
All this does is it goes and finds a package, sees if there's a patch version that's available that just fixes the problem. If it does, then it installs that. That's all it does. Okay, let's go use Vite. So we're gonna go to our source directory, and the first thing I want to do here is we have deleted these script tags from our HTML, so that means React is no longer available in our project, right? So in app.js, we're going to go import React so that we can use it. We're going to say import React from React, and import create root
import React
from React-DOM. And then down here, I think we'll have to go delete the, React DOM.
And also,
okay, so Vite will take care of plugging in React.
And they create root. We're using is the import. Here we're using is create root from. I'm doing this because I know where it comes from. From React DOM. All right. So far, so good. And we can just replace now this create React DOM with this, right? Here.
React here so that all these React references will now work, right? And when you have no curly braces here, this means import the entire library as one top level object, right? Or maybe a different way of saying it, import whatever the library author has designated as the default export of whatever React is. And I will say that's normally all of the things as one giant object, but doesn't have to be. And then this is called a named import, where you're saying go to the React DOM library and only get the create root to be has designated as the default export of whatever React is. And I will say that's normally all of the things as one giant object, but doesn't have to be. And then this is called a named import, where you're saying go to the React DOM library and only get the create root function in this particular case. That's what those curly braces mean. This is a default export, this is a named export. Okay, first of all, one of the cool things is I think we fixed lint. I think if you say npm run lint, you should get no errors now because now there's no globals, right?
Exactly. So there should be no error because now there is no global npm run lint, right? Because now there is no global there.
We know where everything is coming from.
And it's
So that's
one of
pretty
the
cool.
things that I really love about this. And there is no global.
And now let's go and make it so that we can actually run Vite to like actually run our server. So I want you to go to your package.json, and we're gonna add a couple more things into our scripts.
Okay.
I don't know why I have a habit of keeping these alphabetized, but it just became a compulsion one day and I just never stopped it. So build, Vite build, dev, Vite, and preview is Vite preview.
Pretty much, that's all.
I don't know. Some people might say like, well, this looks better like this. I don't know. Honestly, it doesn't really matter what the order here. Whatever you want to do is fine with me. So let's talk about these commands we put in here.
So right now we are putting this command here, okay? In here, where you say, hey, this will be build, and I want this to call Vite build, pretty straightforward. The other is def here and say, well, Vite, just like that. So I want you to run is a dev server from that, and the other is build dev and preview. And I think this is for a production live preview, right? Preview. Okay. Cool.
9 times out of 10, when you come to your local development environment, you're just going to say Vite, and you're just going to get going. So you can do npm run dev and start your project. I have such strong muscle memory to go do npm run dev for any project I get into that I make sure that that's always the command that I want to run. Build, this is something that you would run like in a GitHub action that would actually build the project into like static assets and such that then you could ship off to Vercel or AWS or Netlify or Fly or something like that. And you could serve those from there. And then preview is kind of an interesting one. I don't know if you've ever had a bug that only seemed to manifest whenever you built the project as opposed to run it on the dev server. Preview aims to help with that. It's like, I'm going to build this for production, and then I'm going to serve it to you as if this was a production box to help you kind of figure out those problems. So I almost never use it, but when I do need to use it, I'm glad it's there.
But when I do need it.
And then one more thing, make sure you add a type module. Again, the order here is not important. This is just telling any tool that uses your project, this uses ES modules as opposed to using CommonJS, which is the require style. So that can be helpful as well. All right. So now, in theory, npm run dev, you should get something that looks somewhat akin to this.
Mm-hmm.
So you might be wondering why 5173. I did too. That's why I went and looked it up. What's 5 in Roman numerals?
Interesting. Let me go and read about this. CSG build for Vite Node API is deprecated. Oh, interesting. So it say, hey, you get used to change that. You know, it's not a function. Import plugin.react.react is not a function, but it tell us here, VCS Node API deprecated, which is great because now we can say, okay, there's some couple things that we need to do. One is to get rid of this script, right? Get rid of this script. One. Second, notify to the builder, okay, the Vite, that this is now a model. All right. That this is now a model. Exactly. So that this is now a model. And the other is that it's telling me here that is deprecated. In other words, that you must run this server on models so it can run this. But again, it says something like this. It say, hey, failed to load the config, the Vite config.js, because it says this one. Import React. Wait, what? I already saved this. So import React from Padre.Gino model Vite plugins. This in syntax error. The request model does not provide an export named React. That is here. Does not provide an export called React. What do you call it? It is called like this. It is called React. The author of the co-author actually now by default expose this object called React, not an specific name export functions or that. Okay, so once we navigate to this, we're able to render that as it is.
V. Do you get it now? VITE.
Roman numerals and lead speed.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, that's a stretch, but sure, guys. VITE.
Roman numerals and lead speed.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, that's a stretch, but sure, guys. Yeah, but you can see now, this all still works exactly the way that it was before, but now we're using imports for our React stuff, and it's being served on 5173. So go back to your app.js, and I fixed it here already, but you see React-DOM. This is originally what I had in here, the React DOM. You just need to put React DOM/client. This is the old way of writing it. This is the way that people used to write it, which is why it's still kind of burned in my brain. And I think it'll work through React 18, but they might break it in React 19 or React 20 or something like that. So just put React DOM/client and everything should work.
So if we're using is now, no, I'm not using is now.
JSX, and we're on to core React concepts now. So again, I remember I watched Pete Hunt's talk. I don't even remember which conference it was at, but this would have been 20. So again, I remember I watched Pete Hunt's talk. I don't even remember which conference it was at, but this would have been 2014, no, 20.
Pete Hunt's talks.
Again, I remember I watched Pete Hunt's talk. I don't even remember which conference it was at, but this would have been 2014. 2013. I would have watched this in 2013. I was working at Reddit, and he showed this off, and I was like, this seems like pretty cool. And then he started writing his HTML and his JavaScript, and I was like, I'm out. I don't like this. I don't want anything to do with it. Take your demon magic and go away, right? Like it didn't make any sense to me.
So we built JSX.
And I was reading the story of like how they ended up creating JSX. Is they had created React, and they think this is a good idea, but they had to convince a bunch of Hack developers to use it. Hack is a flavor of PHP, or that might be not quite totally true, but it's very similar to PHP. And so they hacked together this last minute JSX thing to try and convince them, and that's like the PHP developers were like, oh, this is cool, we can use this, right? And then it turned out to be really popular back with the JavaScript developers as well, and so that's how JSX ended up taking off. It was never intended to be the core use case for React, and yet it still is. And now not only does React use it, but like Solid.js uses it. You can use it with like with Vue and some other things as well. So it really took off. So let me tell you about why I came back around when someone reframed this for me. Again, I'm old enough to remember JavaScript in our HTML, where you would click like an on-click handler, and all the JavaScript was just shoved into the HTML, and it was gross. It was hard to debug. It was like trying to debug minified code. It was like landmines throughout all of your HTML, and it was just the worst. And I spent a good part of my first job ripping JavaScript out of HTML. And so the inverse sounded just as bad to me. It's like, I don't want HTML in my JavaScript, right? What the reframing that finally got me to accept JSX, or at least try it out for a longer time, is we just wrote this, right? React, create element, h1, ID, main title, my website. What is this supposed to end up translating to?
Into a JavaScript.
It's supposed to be this,
Into
right? We're
an
literally writing
HTML
code
element.
that mimics HTML. Shouldn't we just write the HTML, right? Instead of trying to mimic it? And when I kind of had that reframing, I was like, oh, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense to me. And when I understood like how JSX is just a very, very thin layer on top of JavaScript, it's not really adding barely any semantics to JavaScript. I was like, okay, I think I can tolerate this. And I have to have a build step anyway, so who cares? So this is what our pizza ends up looking like. In fact, let's just go write that. So open your app.js.
So let me actually make a pause here. Okay. And that'll be all for today's video. Take care. Bye-bye.